Is the second part of the sensation and perception series that I'm doing for Unit 3. This particular video will cover parts of the eye and the visual process. So on the first slide, you can see I have a diagram of an eye. One thing that you need to be able to do is be able to define the anatomy of the eye, understand its function, and be able to label it on an eye diagram. So I have the diagram here, and I'll just walk through starting on the left and then moving to the right as the light is moving through the eye. So we're going to start on the left side, and you can see the light is moving all the way through the eye and hitting the eye in the back of the eye. So we'll start here with this clear outer casing. This clear outer protective casing around the eye is called the cornea. The cornea is the very outer layer, this clear outer layer of the eye. I don't have this on the words below, and you don't need to write this down, but some students sometimes wonder what is the white parts of your eye, and the white parts of your eye, that's called the sclera. The cornea is actually clear, and the cornea actually is just wrapping around the entire eye. As we're moving through the eye, this is a little hard to distinguish because of the way that this diagram is made, but basically the diagram has cut the eye, so what you're seeing on this side right here, this blue piece has been cut in half. That would actually wrap around the center of the eye. That's called the iris. The colorful part of your eye, it is actually a muscle, and that muscle is able to dilate and open and allow more light to enter the eye, and then it's able to constrict and close and allow less light to enter the eye. And so the function of the iris is to adjust the amount of light that is being let into the eye. The dark circle in the center is the pupil, and you see that when you're looking at someone's eyes, you see that dark color right at the center. It's actually not a part at all. The pupil is actually just a hole at the center of the iris. And so the hole is actually, you're looking straight into the back of their eye. And it's dark because you're looking into a place where there is no light at the back of the eye. So you see that dark space, it's actually a hole that you're looking into. So moving deeper into the eye, we have this bubble-like structure. This is called the lens. The function of the lens is to allow you to focus near and far, and the lens uses accommodation, which is basically just its ability to bend so that it can focus your sight near and far. So as the light is moving through the eye, it hits the lens, and it actually is refracted, and it is flipped. The image that you're looking at is flipped upside down on the back of the eye. Your brain is able to interpret it as right side up, but it actually hits the back of your eye upside down. At the very back of the eye, you have this red layer you see on the screen. It's actually the layer of the back of the eye that's around the back of the eye. It's called the retina. The retina is filled with millions of photoreceptors that are absorbing that light and turning that light into a neural message through transduction. At the very back, if we were to look straight into the back of the eye and hit the retina right straight back into the back of the eye, it hits at this very central point. This very central point at the very back of the eye is called the fovea. We also have, if you see just below the fovea, you can see the optic nerve. The optic nerve is where that neural message from those photoreceptors are sent, and it's sent through the optic nerve to the brain to be processed. The optic nerve has no photoreceptors, so it actually gives us this blind spot where the optic nerve touches the back of the eye. So in the spot where the optic nerve touches the eye, you actually have no visual ability. We have a blind spot right here. So we're going to move forward and learn about some of this just in more depth. So on the next slide, I want to show you what accommodation of the lens looks like. So what you need to know from this slide is, what is accommodation?
Behind the iris is the lens of the eye. It helps focus the light coming into your eye so you can see things clearly. The lens flattens so you can see things that are far away, and bends so you can see things up close. When the lens, cornea, and pupil are all working together properly, they will focus light on the back of the eye.
So that's accommodation of the lens. So here we're going to talk a little bit in more detail about the retina. And the retina is this very light sensitive layer of the eye. I like this this 3D image we have right here that I want you to see how the eye looks and how you see that you can see back into this layer that is the retina in the back. You can see we've got the lens here, and you can see that retina wrap around the back, and you can see where the optic nerve touches. We're going to look at that layer here in this diagram. The retina is filled with very, very light sensitive cells called photoreceptors. You can see there's the photoreceptors. What will happen is, let's start with the light. So as the light moves through the eye and hits the back of the eye, it actually goes and hits the cones and rods first. You can see here the cones are called cones because they have somewhat of a cone shape. And then we have rods that are more stick-like, and so we call those rods. So the process is the rods and cones will take this light and turn it into a nerve impulse or an action potential. And those rods and cones will then send that message forward to two more cells that you can see here. We've got bipolar cells and then ganglion cells, and then it will move on to the optic nerve. You don't necessarily need to know too much about bipolar cells and ganglion cells other than the process by which it moves to the optic nerve. So the light will hit the back of the retina. It will be processed by the rods and cones and turned into a neural message. It will then move to the bipolar cells and then onto the ganglion cells and then through the optic nerve. What I remember to try to remember the order of this is I think of this idea of moving from least to greatest, and I know this sounds kind of strange, but I'll kind of explain. If you see it hits rods and cones first, and then we have this cell called a bipolar cell, and I think of bipolar and bi meaning two, and so we've got two, and then gang is usually a bunch of things, and so I think of we're moving from one, rods and cones, to two, bipolar is the second stage, and three, we're moving on to the gang, which is bigger, which will then take us on to the optic nerve. So you should know the order of how the light moves through the eye. It hits the rods and cones first, is processed into a neural message, moves to the bipolar cells, ganglion cells, and then the optic nerve. One more thing about rods and cones. Cones are the cells that process color and allow you to see color. I think this is easy to remember because cone starts with C and so does color. Cones are also mostly concentrated at the very center of the back of the eye. Center also starts with C, and so all of those things I remember. Cones are located towards the center of the back of the eye. They help process color, and they're also helping you see clarity and fine detail, which clarity also starts with a C. The rods are more concentrated in the periphery on the outsides of your retina. The rods help you see in dark spaces when there's really dim lighting. And you actually, rods, they don't have the ability to interpret color. Cones need a lot of light to operate in, and that might help you understand why when it is really dark in a dark room, your cones cannot pick up a lot of information, but your rods can. And so when you're in a dark room, you might notice you really don't have a lot of ability to see color. And that's because your cones cannot pick up enough information in that dark, dimly lit room. Whereas when it's really bright, your cones can operate really well in a well-lit room and can see color really clearly. Okay, so our next section is called feature detectors, and my picture is a little bit in the way. I'm going to drag myself over a little bit. So we're moving on to how we process visual information. There are cells in the brain called feature detectors that allow you to recognize different objects that you're familiar with. So what feature detectors do is they allow you to recognize something as a face, or recognize something as a car, or recognizing as a whole object. What it will do is as that image goes to your brain, the feature detectors pick up on all the pieces and allow you to see it as one unified image, and you're able to think of it as that image and not all of the individual parts. So it would be like if someone has damage to feature detectors, they might struggle, like they might see someone's face, but not recognize them. This is actually called face blindness or propagnosia, but it's this inability to process it as a single entity, and it's that you're just pressing it as all the parts, and so you're not able to recognize what it is. One other visual processing ability we have is called parallel processing, and you use it all the time. You just probably don't realize it. But parallel processing is your ability to process multiple different types of visual stimulus at once. So when you see a car passing by, you're able to process its, while you're watching it, its speed, its shape, its color, maybe how far away it is from you, the depth, and you're able to process all of those things simultaneously, and you don't have to individually process each one of those different parts of that visual image of the car moving by, and that's visual or parallel processing. Okay, and finally we're going to end on theories of color. Theories of color deal with trying to explain how we are able to see color and understand color. And we know that our color vision comes from our cones. We know that cones are involved in color vision. We're just not exactly sure the different colors that we see, how our cones are interpreting that. And so there's two theories for color vision. The first theory is on the left. It is the trichromatic theory of color. It's also called the Young-Helmholtz trichromatic theory of color. And basically this theory states that we have three different types of cones: a red cone, a green cone, and a blue cone. And they pick up on variations of red, variations of green, and variations of blue, and those variations allow us to see color. The second theory of color is called the opponent process theory of color, and the opponent process theory of color, I'm going to show you over here on this side, shows us that we have different types of cones, and our different types of cones, actually what they're doing is each cone sees two contrasting colors. For example, we have a cone that sees red and green, and we have a cone that sees blue and yellow. But we also have a rod that sees black and white. So the reason why this particular theory is well supported is because it better explains color blindness, or if someone has full color blindness or partial color blindness. So for example, if someone has full color blindness, the opponent process theory would say that they have two cones that are not operating. They have their red-green cone that's not operating and their blue-yellow cone that is not operating. So they are only able to pick up visual information with their rods that see black and white. Now, partial color blindness would be if they would have some kind of dysfunction in one of their cones. So for example, if they're having difficulty distinguishing reds and greens, then that means that their red-green cone has some kind of dysfunction, and so they have trouble distinguishing reds and greens, or vice versa, maybe blues and yellows. They have trouble with blues and yellows. And so that helps to understand color blindness, in that we have cones that are both, we have two cones that are responsible for seeing contrasting colors. One cone sees red greens, one cone sees blue yellows, and then we have a rod that sees black and white. There's another piece of evidence to support this, and that's something called the afterimage effect. And so you've probably seen the afterimage effect before. You've probably seen an image with inverted colors like the one I have below. Typically what will happen with this is someone will have you stare at this image that is inverted, and then have you, maybe for 30 seconds, and then have you look at a white wall, or even close your eyes, and you will then see that same image with inverted colors. So then, or with the colors reverted. So then you would see a flag that's red, white, and blue. And the idea behind this is that your cone that is seeing blues, or your cones that is seeing greens, or whatever is going on, it is it is getting like tired, and so it will kick on and see the opposing color if you are to look at a white wall. And so that's the support for the opponent process theory. So in this video, we learned about parts of the eye and the visual